Welcome to the latest episode of the 4020 Rugby League podcast, 3rd of June 2024. Richard Short here alongside former Super League match official James Child and a man who writes more of my column than I do, Phil Kaplan. And, well, there's no... we're going to talk about people because 24 hours ago it was announced that Rob Burrow had passed away. And we've had 24 hours of mourning, Phil. And now is time, perhaps, for us on the outside to celebrate the life of a remarkable individual, both on and obviously off the pitch. And you knowing better than the other two on the podcast. So tell us about your relationship with Rob Burrow. And I assume you've seen probably pretty much every game he's played in Leeds colours.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's safe to say it's not about me, so we shouldn't focus on that. And the three of us, I know, will send our sincerest condolences to his family, who are wonderful people. I mean, he is the product, obviously, of Jeff and Irene, who were fabulous. I can't say enough about Lindsay and the kids that are in their image. I think everybody will talk about words like legend and role model and legacy, and the fact is, Rob loved two things. He loved rugby league and he loved his family. And he loved both of those with an immense amount of humour. That ran through his career. So we, quite rightly have heard a lot about the little man who overcomes adversity. But the one thing that he used alongside his prodigious talent was his humour. So he wouldn't want us to get too maudlin on this podcast. He might want us to say some quite nice things about him, which obviously we're going to do. But I think, he'd be the last one that would say, don't shed tears, just, look forward. And I don't know. I mean, when you look at it from a purely rugby league point of view, I don't know of anybody whose passing would be recognised by the royal family. Every national newspaper front page, the England football team that are going to pay tribute, a contestant on Britain's Got Talent who mentioned him just after the news had broken, national television, and Fred Sirieix. When you put that mix together, that's some legacy. And his rugby career was all about timing. He had impeccable timing, because if he didn't have, he would have been monstered a great more number of times than he was. And you look at the timing of his passing. Leeds are playing Castleford, born in one place, played for the other. Wembley is due this weekend. We can pay the most fulsome tribute to him on the national stage. The ground has been broken this morning at the Rob Burrow Centre, which he was absolutely ridiculously passionate about, and that's what a lot of the money and the efforts of Kevin Sinfield went towards. So to do that at the same time that all the focus can be thrown off him and onto his centre, that is just so Rob Burrow. I'm told that he was watching the Leeds Castleford game on Saturday evening on his iPad. And I'm not saying that, the Leeds' performance had anything to do with that, but to think that he might have gone out with a little bit of smile on his face, that gives us a measure of condolence as well. So, yeah, we'll get into more detail about him and what he meant, and obviously some of the memories that he leaves. But I think the most important thing is that we should talk about him with joy in our hearts, because that's what he would have wanted.
I'm assuming, James, he wasn't a nightmare to referee then, being the precocious scamp that he was.
No, he was just one of those players that blended into the background from a referee's perspective. I mean, clearly not in terms of his stature and his ability, because he stood out, didn't he? His ability with the ball and his ability to sort of sidestep and swerve and duck under somebody was incredible. But as a personality, as a referee, he was absolutely fine, really. I mean, he didn't really captain Leeds, did he? In the Kevin Sinfield era, so the opportunity to speak to him on a one-to-one basis was limited during a game, but from a referee's perspective, that's manna from heaven in many ways if you haven't got somebody chewing your ear off. So no, he was a gentleman, I think, on and off the pitch. But unfortunately, I don't really have many stories to tell really away from the field. I mean, he was just spectacular to watch on the field. I touched on the grand final that is the clip that's being played regularly where he does duck under. I think it was the St Helens defence, wasn't it? And at that moment, I was on the south stand side, and as soon as he ducked under the defence, you just knew that he was going to score, even though he was 45 metres out. The sheer pace and ability to sidestep people was fantastic. But what you've already used the word, Phil, but that's the word that I've been talking about when people have been asking me today at work, is legacy. Because what a legacy he leaves. I mean, how proud must his family be of how he battled the illness, and how we've all seen his children and how his family have grown with the illness, and how his girls have matured and speaking in public about the sad situation. But the amount of money that's been raised and hopefully the progress that will have been made to try and find a cure for the illness, and the centre that's about to be sort of constructed is his legacy. And I'm sure that within the next few years, further advances will be made in relation to the medical sort of technology.
It is an amazing legacy for someone that what they have done and their friends and family around them will genuinely benefit people in the future.
I think there's, just going back very briefly to his rugby career that James was just talking about. I think, yes, that try that has been shown quite rightly as the most wonderful solo effort in a grand final. Coming off the bench and getting a unanimous vote for man of the match, that is astonishing. But I would say that there are two things about that. I think the second try he created for Ryan Hall in the context of the game and the skill that he had to exhibit to send Ryan Hall clear was actually better. I'm not going to argue with the fact that as a TV clip or a social media clip, his solo try is everything that we should be focusing on, because his career is almost encapsulated in that 6 seconds. But in terms of skill and match determination, the way he summed up what was happening out wide, the show and go, the dummy that absolutely took the St Helens defence apart, and then at the speed he was going to give Ryan Hall the perfect pass to put him in the corner. I honestly think, and it's a minority of one, that's a better try. And I think the other thing that gets missed about his career is everybody quite rightly talks about his speed, but we don't spend enough time talking about his defence, because there are so many people of smaller stature that get exposed. I mean, we probably saw it a couple of times in Super League this weekend, where you target the smaller players and you get it right, the big prop rumbles over the top of the little guy. Well, the number of times that teams tried to put the bigger man on Rob, and what he never shied from and what he never asked for on his inside was anybody to do his defensive job for him. He could do that, and understandably with everybody examining his greatness in terms of the titles that he won and all that kind of thing, I think we miss that sometimes, that he didn't defend beyond the winger. He stood his ground as near to the middle of the field as you'd expect a scrum half to do, and particularly when he was playing as auxiliary hooker, and he could only do that because he could defend. And to me, that's the greatest attribute when you talk about how you overcome adversity of size in that game, is you could put him in the middle of the field and he would not let you down. So that's one thing that I think we should, with his career, that we shouldn't forget. I don't know. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that it's almost, and you can relate it to politics. We're in a time at the moment of a general election, and we've got people promising the earth and delivering little, and yet all the statements that I've seen from Kevin in particular, but Rob right there at his side, about people taking more care of each other, about looking after those less fortunate than yourselves, about looking out for a neighbour, about doing something for a mate. I mean, to me, they are just such powerful messages in the world that we live in at the moment. And again, sort of relating it back to the day-to-day of rugby league, we've seen players and coaches under pressure in the recent future, not least at the club that Rob loved with all his heart. And yet, really, the message is look after each other, do it together, stay strong. To me, it's just an incredibly powerful message that he leaves, along with the legacy of the money, the nearer we are to the cure. We're going to see a fabulous centre built just outside of the centre of Leeds in Seacroft Hospital, which is going to be state of the art. It's going to bear his name, so we'll never forget it when we drive past. He's been involved in the design of it. There's certain things that he's experienced through going through MND that he doesn't want other people to. Again, if you're talking about legacy, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, well, as good as it gets. What's that? 2015, the treble winning side. He is part of this best ever lead. So, well, you can tell me if they are the best ever lead side, but he's an indelible part of history. He's in the Leeds Hall of Fame, and you had to break the rules to do that, Phil. And obviously, we know why you had to break the rules, not you personally, but the committee, and it was the right thing to do, because as we've seen so many times, and I think as Kevin Sinfield said today, he wishes he was here to hear what people are saying about him. At least he was able to enjoy that and get that recognition.
I think the great thing about that is if you watch the interview with him afterwards, it just means everything to him, and that's what you'd hope, that whatever he remembers from his time in the game, if he can have looked back and said, I was Hall of Fame, then that's the best you can offer him at a club level. There needs to be a debate at some point, and I'm sure there will, about the RFL's Hall of Fame. I don't see any reason why he can't be considered for that at some point. And I don't think that's a knee-jerk reaction. I think he is one of the greatest players of the Super League era. I don't think it's a value judgment purely with a Leeds hat on, and as you say, with the I suppose the ability of having seen him play in every game that he did, and quite a lot of him at academy level, with the honour and the privilege of being able to interview him after so many of the big games, when he wasn't looking to seek the limelight. He was the ultimate team player. We'll come on to what he's done for MND, but that contrast between being quite a private player and wanting to be the team man on the rugby field and opening himself up, in his private life at his most vulnerable, is again a massive legacy that he leaves, that will make sufferers in future feel far more positive about what they're going through. And again, I don't think you can put too high a value on that. But I would say that he is the greatest number 7 that Leeds have ever had. I think there's only 2 other candidates. It's Jeff Stevenson and Barry Seaborn. But he knocks them into a cocked hat because of the number of titles that he won, and that he played in an era whereby there was very little protection. So, when they played, the forwards spent 20 minutes beating the hell out of each other, and the little guys then got on with winning the game. And they were brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant. And I don't think that, again, there was much more poignant than the 2007 grand final, where again, Rob was so influential. That was the day that Jeff Stevenson died. And I think that night at Old Trafford, he inherited that mantle of being Leeds' greatest number 7. I don't think that's up for debate.
It's a time to remember a great player, James. Obviously, you mentioned you're on the touch line for that try. Do you have any other memories of him as a spectator rather than as a referee?
Probably not really, but he given his stature, that he was somebody that stood out, and therefore he was a fan's favourite at the time that he played. It's not because of his illness or because of whatever. And so any sentiment that people might sort of think is irrelevant. any all the sort of plaudits that he received were absolutely well deserved during his career. And I just think, you know, given his stature, he must have received, and you'll know this better than me, Phil, but he must have received many opinions along the way as a junior coming through that you just won't make it because you're not big enough. And so that bloody mindedness, I'm sure, you know, must have contributed to the success he had throughout his career, that he had that willingness to prove people wrong. And even at the time, I think that Phil hinted at it there, he sort of ended up going from a regular starting position to sort of having to sort of cling on to his position in the team, which is almost, you know, given the success that he had, and as Phil's probably rightly said, and he'll know far, far better than me, that if he's, you know, the best number 7 that Leeds Rhinos as the club have ever had, then, you know, for somebody to sort of cling on to a starting 17 place, but at the time he was. But it, you know, from the outside looking in, he just seemed to get on with it. And he almost sort of found a new level in himself by coming off the bench, and you know, injecting that pace that he was known for into the game. So yeah, he was just as I've said before, you know, it was a pleasure to referee, and you know, he will be sadly missed, and he was sadly missed when he retired from playing. Never mind anything else, but you know, he's obviously keen to stay involved in the club after he you know, finished refereeing, playing. And it was a shame that he wasn't able to continue to give that back to the next generation. I'm sure they would have benefited hugely from his experience.
I think we've had a few players of the last few hours, last 24 hours or so, say that, haven't they? Cam Smith, obviously, on the telly yesterday. I thought spoke very, very well to be put in that position literally just after the news had been announced. I thought he was well, I said it on Twitter, a great ambassador for the sport and the club, and his fame, if you will, is nothing to do with his rugby league career, because it all comes when he gets his diagnosis. I remember us being sat down at the shop, Phil, and doing a podcast just before Christmas in 2018, 2019, whatever it was. Time flies, and whoever at BBC Breakfast picked it up has changed lives as well, because without that backing for this story, it might just be another rugby league thing where we do a few, you know, sponsored walks or whatever, but it's turned into this gigantic thing involving Kevin Sinfield, Blue Peter badges and everything.
Yeah, I think the sort of hinted at it before that, you know, if you'd have lined up all of the people that were going to lay themselves bare in front of the nation whilst going through the most debilitating of diseases, you wouldn't have picked Rob. And I think a lot of that is down again to, and I can't speak highly enough of her, is Lindsay, because without her agreeing to do it, because so much of it fell on her and was going to fall on her. You know, she will have also had to make the decision, you know, do my kids want to grow up in the glare of publicity, and how will that affect them in the future? And the fact is that we've come to love them, you know, with every fibre of our being, and my thoughts today are with them, and you know, obviously something that they could have partially prepared them for, because they knew what the end game was going to be. But every time I had the privilege of meeting them, they're just gorgeous kids, and thrust in that spotlight really could have affected them. I mean, Jackson won't have known anything other than his dad having MND, because he wasn't old enough to know. So he will have seen virtually all of his dad's life in a wheelchair. But again, doesn't seem to have affected him. I can remember that his kids produced some wonderful Christmas cards 2 or 3 years ago, and they drew them, and they were you know, Rob's feet and his hands and Christmas trees, and you know, we've tried in our tiny modest way to do whatever we can to help raise some money, so we have them on sale, and they very kindly came in to do a signing of those cards, and they were glorious. Rob was there and smiling, Lindsay was there organising, but the kids were the stars of the show. When we helped launch the children's book that they wrote together at Headingley around the time of the internationals, the idea was that Kevin and Rob would, well, Rob would have his books pre-signed with a stamp, and Kevin would sign them. But the kids took charge. Will signed them. You know, which one? Who's got the best signature? Who's doing them the fastest? They were glorious. They're wonderful people, and I think to allow yourself to be put in that position where their growing up is going to be put under scrutiny. They're you know, people are going to look at them and you know, wonder, you know, what they're going through. And they've been on the pitch in that Sky takeover. That they were absolutely brilliant. They've been involved in performing at the Rob Burrow Strictly events. You know, before all of that, they've danced on the field. For Rob to agree to do that, and for Lindsay to give that her blessing when he was a true reluctant hero. It wasn't hard to get an interview out of him. If you asked him to do an interview, he would do one. There was absolutely no question about that. But he would always look around and see, is there anybody else that could do it? Because, you know, they'd be better than me, and I'm you know, I'm the team player. You don't want to hear from me. He was incredibly modest and never wanted to thrust himself forward. So to do that in the nation's eye, just sensation, absolutely sensation.
Dick Roberts said it after the wheelchair Grand Challenge Cup final on Saturday. The old cliche that you don't know. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That's it. And you don't know how you're going to react to things. You know, everyone has things going on in their life behind the scenes that they don't know how they're going to react to until they happen. And it's an amazing. I can't find the words. Respect and not sympathy. Respect is the word for how his family have dealt with this. And again, as you say, being thrust into the limelight, so to speak. And no one would have wanted them to be in the limelight. We'd all rather Rob Burrow was still here, of course, but his work and his legacy and everything, as we've seen from not just people in rugby league, not just people in sport, as you said, Phil, not just politicians, not just people who have no knowledge of what we do or anything, have come out and said what they feel about him and Kevin Sinfield. And it's just nice to know, James, that there are some nice people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It reassures you in human mankind, doesn't it? But I think what people can see is they can resonate with a family, with young children, and you know, a lot of people will have children, and inevitably they see themselves in that situation. How would they cope in that situation? How would their children cope? How would their wife cope? And that strong bond that he obviously had with Lindsay, you know, they met when they were aged 15. I was reading today, and barely spent a day apart. You know, probably other than rugby league getting in the way, his other love, and you know, and the you know, when you marry for richer and for poorer and for better and for worse, but you never probably envisaged that you'll do what Lindsay had to do for the last four and a bit years, you know, and whilst raising 3 young children, and people can resonate with that, and in the same way that, you know, when Kevin Sinfield picked Rob Burrow and carried him over the line, that broke people's hearts because that was all about friendship. And yeah, I think Phil sort of said that earlier on, didn't he? About, you know, in this day and age, it's quite the same. Our friendship's quite the same. Our relationship's quite the same. And it's great to see that actually they are, and that bond that you can have in a teammate. And that's what the power of a team sport brings, I think. That actually they ended up being more than just teammates, weren't they? Because there are lots of people that they would have played alongside, but there was a genuine bond there. There's a photo that I've seen doing the rounds again in the last 24 hours. It's on the corridors of the tunnel area where some of the greats from that treble winning team are lined up behind Rob, and in particular it's Kevin's face that stands out to me. As you can see, sort of Kevin is the one that's looking towards the back of Rob and almost hoping everything goes all right, and you can see him with that sort of brotherly love in his eyes, really looking towards Rob. And it's just, I think that's what people are really engaged with, is that sort of brotherhood and that familial connection.
Now we've all got to do marathons and stuff because he set the bar too high. That's why he can't get a knighthood, because he set the bar too high for us mere mortals, as Kevin Sinfield. Is there anything else we need to add, Phil? Because I'm kind of lost. It's been a strange 24 hours.
I think there probably are a couple of things. I think just following on from what James said about mateship and teamship and being the captain and looking after your flock. I mean, they did sit next to each other in the dressing room at training and on match days. So that paternal feel that Kevin has is could not be anything other than born out of the ethics of team sport, which I think is very important, and we lose sight of that. There's players don't spend as long at clubs anymore, and you don't perhaps get that feeling of camaraderie. And I think that when Rob did the very first interview about his diagnosis with Tanya Arnold on the BBC, the bit that strikes you more than anything, or me, was that when Rob broke down, it's Kevin that comes out of the shadows and just walks over and puts his arms around him and says, "Are you okay?" He's not going to stop the interview. He's not going to get in the way of the interview. He's not going to take over the interview. But he sees that moment where his mate needs an arm around him. And I think that is priceless. And I think you take that out of the sporting context, and that's why it's so important. And those pictures of him carrying his friend over the line, that resonated at the Leeds Marathon. That resonated with people outside of sport. So yeah, I think some had heard of Rugby League, some had heard of MND, some had heard of the charity work that was being done. But that image encapsulated everything. I think a couple of things, if we're talking about Rob's character, in the international arena in 2006, he was taken on tour and never used. So he was away for almost 6 weeks, which, because of his love of his family and the routine that he had of, finishing training and taking them to the soft play areas. And mind you, he did call in for a McDonald's on the way. And a Coke. He loved McDonald's and a Coke. To spend six weeks away and never get a look in a game, a lot of players would have perhaps then become jaundiced about representing your country or feeling undervalued. The following year in 2007, when he did make the Great Britain team against New Zealand, he was player of the series. And I think that determination and bloody mindedness sort of sums him up and was at the root of him, and goes back to what James was saying from right when he was a teenager and he was playing in the under 10s and under 11s, and people were picking him out and going, he's talented, but he'll never make it because he's not big enough. That for me was he's then playing at the very highest level for his country, and he still has to wait a year to prove himself. But not only does he prove himself, but he proves himself to be the best player on the pitch in that series. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that, again, just going back to something that James was saying about that picture on the tunnel in Headingley, over the 130 odd years of that stadium being in existence, there's been some iconic moments and matches. I think the best atmosphere I've ever seen with a Leeds game was when they beat Manly there in the World Club Challenge. But going back to 40,000, the record attendance in 1947 against Bradford, there will have been some amazing moments there. Clearly it's one of the foundation grounds. So first Test match, first cup final. Taking all of that into account, I think that game, which was actually Jamie Jones Buchanan's testimonial, which again tells you something about this bond of that group of players, where both teams agreed that Rob would make his final appearance, and that last 10 minutes of that game, it was a pre-season game. It had something in it until 10 minutes from time when everything changed. I don't think I've ever been at a game where there was as much emotion, pride, atmosphere, what Rugby League stands for, that it goes beyond club loyalty. And I think when Rob was interviewed afterwards on the microphone and could barely speak, understandably, when he started to break down, it wasn't just the Leeds fans that started chanting his name, it was the Bradford fans. But that night, evening as well, there were jerseys of so many other clubs. And I to me, if you're gonna say what's the one thing that you'll remember on the field, it would be that game. under the most saddest of circumstances. But as a sport, we rallied round in a way that I haven't seen to that extent, and I don't know if we'll ever see again.
So the legacy we've got to uphold then is when we go down to Wembley on Saturday and there's the minute silence and the applause on the 7th minute. That we've got to have a McDonald's on the way down then and a Coke. That's what we've got to do. That's it. For all the people listening. If you want to pay tribute in a special way that you and I will only know, then do that, and or whichever other fast food provider you want to celebrate with. It's not a time to talk about naming stands and statues and stuff, Phil, because the real legacy will be, as you say, that we all try and be better. And it's not easy sometimes because this world is what it is. Plenty of Burks around, but if we can be better, then at least at least we're doing our bit, aren't we?
I think it's looking after each other. I think the message is that I mean, Rob and Kev have another children's book coming out, and it's about a friendship between two people called Rob and Kev. And I don't know if that's going to be delayed now. It's too early to say, but I think it will be out this year. And these two people and what they've done for each other will never go away. There is still a plan to erect a statue to them in that embrace that very famous coming off the field after a notable victory. And I think that things like that stall because they do take a lot of money. And I suspect now that the will be there to raise the finance to put that plan to be at the corner of the pitch between the south stand and the east stand, where there's that the gap that looks over onto St Michael's Lane. And I think to have them looking down on the pitch in that embrace, nobody will ever forget that. And that is the kind of legacy. I think rushing into that is a danger, and I don't think people will. But clearly, one of the things that has happened over the last 4.5 years is that this kind of thing has been thought about because of the inevitability attached to it. And nobody's going to let the name of Rob Burrow get pushed to one side. Kevin, amongst a lot of other people, will ensure that doesn't happen. They've held government to account with money that was promised and wasn't delivered for research. Well, again, we're at an election time that they're not going to let that go either. Great to see the political leaders both, lend their tributes, but words are easy. Whoever gets into power now has to deliver on those promises, and that's where it will change for people outside of rugby league who've never seen Rob play or heard of Rob Burrow until he started saying, this disease is cruel. The people that suffer it are neglected. We need to do something about that. Not only do we need to do something about it, but we're going to set the ball rolling and start doing something about that. And because of what he started, there will be an end game. People will be better cared for, not only in their treatment, but the money that was being raised, half of which is going to trying to find a cure. At some point, it will. And when it does, Rob Burrow's name will forever be mentioned that he and Kevin Sinfield were germane to the fact that a cure was found to a terrible disease that nobody talked about until Rob put himself front and centre.
Just imagine how special it's going to be in October. And I know no players go out there with the express intent to be awarded the Player of the Match award, but the first winner of the Rob Burrow award at the grand final in October, it's going to be a very special occasion. James, before we go to the break, any final thoughts or memories or anything?
I think Phil's eloquently put it together. It's very hard sometimes to put it into words, isn't it? The feeling and the emotions that it's captured the whole nation. I mean, I looked last night, it was the headline on the BBC, and I thought, I wonder if it's the headline on Sky News, because obviously BBC had pushed that story for so long, and it was. And maybe that's where I thought, well, I'm so close to rugby league that I don't quite appreciate how big this story has captured the nation. And it clearly has. And I'm pleased it has in a way, because hopefully that will lead to ultimately what Kevin and Rob want, which is a cure for MND.
Actions rather than words, as my wife used to say to me all the time, and I never listened to her. So I should listen at some point. I should listen. I started when everyone's laughing because I just said something that I can't say on the podcast. But you'll have to work out. Apart from, we need to educate these Australians, Phil, because I don't think they understand the. In Australia, you can do whatever you want, right? And here you can't do whatever you want in terms of words and phrases. So, can you have a word with these Australians? Because they're never going to learn.
Tell that to Thailand, mate.
What's happened? Welcome back to the podcast. What's happened on the pitch then this weekend? Everything seems to have been a long time ago now because, it was. But what was the Super League highlight of the weekend? Because I didn't see Wigan and Warrington, and I'm guessing you didn't see either, Phil, because you were at Headingley.
Yeah, sadly not. I've seen the highlights, and I think again, huge credit to the youngsters that Warrington have brought through. Very costly for Wigan because they've lost 2 players for the cup final. 3 match bans for Tyler Dupree and Adam Kieran. I don't think certainly Kieran can argue. And that looked like an elbow smash to the head. I couldn't find much mitigation. The fact that the player he hit was being I think were they saying he was dipping or something, but again it looked like a first contact with the head, so I don't think there's any argument with that. Dupree I've seen the clip of, and he does seem to, as he gets up, headbutt his tackler. So again I'm pretty sure that if we're going to appeal, they're certainly not going to play in the cup final because they're not going to go from 3 matches to mistaken identity. I thought in terms of performances, Holkar, Nilling, Lee seemed like again something that was praiseworthy. The only other thing I would say is that Catalan St Helens, which was the game, my game of choice on Friday night, there was an incident in that where Frank Maria was sin-binned. Again, to me, for predominantly hitting the head of George Delaney. Whether the mitigation there came off his back, and obviously first impact wasn't with the head, but it seemed to me that the head rocked back, and there needs to be a punishment for that. And perhaps at the beginning of the season, we were seeing red cards for that. We were seeing the match review panel getting involved in incidents like that. Nothing in the minutes of the panel this week. He's not been called up. And I think the other thing that was strange with that incident was that it looked to me like George Delaney should have gone off for an HIA. Now, again, medical people far more qualified than I am attending to him, and if he's not showing any symptoms, that's great. But I thought we had spotters, and I would have said, if it's an incident whereby a player has been sin-binned, and we can argue about whether he should have been sent off and then banned, then the victim of that needs just to go and be checked out. So I found that quite strange.
Are we in that situation now, James, where, as ever, we crack down on something at the start of the season, people moan about it, so we kind of, I don't want to say wind back, and then we come on and say, well, we're not consistent now because, like Phil said, that would have been a red card. That might have been a red card at the start of the season, and now it's this and that.
Well, I don't think it's unfair to say they have wound back, because they have wound back. I think what's unclear is how far have they wound back, because I don't know, and I'm reviewing Super League game.
Well, now we're all in trouble then, aren't we? If you don't know, we are in trouble.
I've got a good idea, but I'm reading between lines that I shouldn't really have to need to read between, because the lines have become fewer, as we've talked about before, in that the minutes no longer include incidents that they're no longer charging, and therefore you have to assume if you've witnessed a yellow card in a game, and I've not seen that game, so I can't comment on that incident, but clearly the match review panel have determined that that's not worthy of any form of charge, even whether that be caution through to a grade F, and therefore not worthy of anything more than whatever was given on field, perhaps. I think the other thing that they've sort of started doing is taking a little bit of account of what action has been taken on field. So if a player has been sin-binned, they've probably said, okay, well, that's probably sufficient punishment. But we're not seeing the minutes of that. So again, you're having to read between the lines of that. And in previous years, we've had the sin-bin programme that Rod Studd used to present, where on a monthly basis, they would go through incidents like that with members of the match review panel or whoever. and that hasn't resurfaced yet. Unless it's on Sky Plus, and Sky Plus I don't have, but you tell me, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware that exists. We've got the Our League platform that, as far as I'm aware, is not being used. So for me, I think there's a far less transparency than there ever has been, and I think there has to be a much greater level of transparency. So I'm hopeful that next year there will be, but I think from the game's point of view, it has to get clear on where it wants to be, because if it's still going ahead with the reduction in tackle height, we are going to see, whether you like it or not, we are going to see backlash towards that next year, just as we've seen it at the beginning of this year. So people can't really complain that now players are not being banned because they were complaining before when they were being banned. So the RFL has really got to do a big education piece, if that's where they're going again next year with this reduction in tackle height, about what exactly is a ban and what won't be a ban, and what's a grade A and what's a grade C or a D or whatever, because education and information is power, really. I think where you get a lack of understanding is what creates the vacuum that people then discuss. I mean, people will probably still discuss it anyway, but at least people will be informed.
I think Steve Mascord was pretty much volunteering, Phil, to sit inside on the judiciary process, or wanting someone to volunteer to sit inside on the judiciary process. Would that help things if there was a media representative there to report, much like court reporting? You know, I have done that in the past. I have sat in on a murder trial and had to make sure I got things right. Otherwise, I would have been in contempt of court. Do we need someone there to just make sure all the details are revealed to the general public at large?
Well, as a non-journalist, I just think it would. I mean, I just think the greater level of transparency that you can have in anything helps people to understand how they've arrived at a decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that people will agree with it, but at least they can see the rationale. It's a little bit like, you know, video referee for long enough was never heard from, was it? Were they? You know, and then when the BBC introduced that, Sky eventually accepted that that was a better model, and I think it is a better model. And I think that's one of the frustrations with VAR in football, is that people cannot hear why decisions are being made. Now, you know, again, they may disagree with the decision once it's been made, but at least they understand how it's been arrived at. So I just think the far more information, education, and access, open access that you can give to people, the better. I mean, in years gone by, we've had journalists come into the referees department. Gareth Walker shadowed the department for a day, and probably others have visited on occasions. But yeah, I think there's definite opportunity to do something like that, because it is a little bit of a dark art.
We weren't going to go on that running around the track, though, were we, Phil? When we went on, whatever that was that January, February? The year has been so long already.
We weren't even going to go on the medicine ball, to be honest. Rolling around on that.
My knees are still recovering from getting on the floor to interview Marcus Griffiths. I don't know about anything else. I mean, the Warrington Wigan game is obviously the one that everyone was talking about, and I got back in time to see the last 5 minutes or so, but it doesn't matter, because it has no bearing whatsoever on what's going to happen on Saturday, because, you know, dollars to donuts, I'll bet Ryan Hampshire's not starting for Wigan, and neither will half of the Warrington side. It
has a psychological value, I think, because there was that feeling before this game that, you know, there was that started to be that invincibility about Wigan, and that, you know, that it's the beginning of a dynasty, and if they win, they'll have every trophy on their sideboard, which rarely happens. And Matty Pete has now won every. You know, it's almost like it's the Wigan story, and somebody's got to break that bubble around them. I think that the fact that they were run so close by a team that had 4 debutants in it, and they've now lost 2 of the players that you would think would have been selected for probably in the first 17, then I think that has changed the dynamic a little bit, and probably does play slightly into Warrington's hands. I think the great thing is that it's another cup final where we don't really know who's going to win, and I think you could say 2 of the 3 that we're going to watch on Saturday, there isn't a hot favourite, and again, you know, going back to Rob, that I would hope that, because a lot of the day is going to be based around a tribute to him, that maybe some people who don't support any of the teams that are there but feel like they want to be part of the Rugby League family, whatever that means, however we define it, may well now buy a ticket this week and go down and just enjoy the games, because you don't know who's going to win them, but also just show some solidarity, be part of the atmosphere, all that kind of thing. And I do think that what this weekend did was allowed us to go down there and have these debates, rather than just say, oh, if we can turn up and play the way we saw them play in the semi-final, the likelihood is that, you know, we're going to be crowning them as Challenge Cup winners. I don't think it's as clear cut now after Saturday's game.
What's obviously clear cut is that Leeds are still rubbish, because that win was just papering over the cracks, Phil. I read that on the internet. I mean, what's Rowan Smith to do? He wins a game and he's still criticised for winning. I mean, the poor lad.
He's not criticised by everybody. It's small, but vociferous minority. I think what Leeds showed on Saturday night, irrespective of the fact that it was a poor performance from Castleford and Craig Lingard left the press in no doubt that was nearer the 2 or 3 out of 10 rather than the 7 or 8 that they occasionally get to. And that's a surprise, because normally Castleford coming to Headingley is built around, this is our cup final, and our supporters like nothing better than to see us put one on the big city guys, and it didn't happen. But part of the reason it didn't happen was that Leeds were pretty much in control from the first set of 6. They had a try disallowed at the end of the first set, which, again, that debate of if it had gone up as try, it would have been a try. It went up as no try. It's hard to then find a reason to give a try. And they kicked on from that. So, yeah, I thought some performers for Leeds were outstanding. I thought Reece Martin dominated the game with his 20 points. Brodie Croft was absolutely excellent. And there was a lot of intensity coming off the bench as well. And you know, Castleford will rightly point to the fact that Paul McShane didn't play, and that does make a huge difference. But Andy Ackers didn't play for Leeds. He pulled out late on, and so yeah, I think that was what was great is it felt like Super League. It was a really sunny, nice Saturday evening. There was a lot of, you know, shirt sleeves being worn. There was 14,500 people there, which looked to me like a pretty genuine crowd. And hats off to the Castleford fans for packing out the Western Terrace. And it was a game that was played predominantly with the ball being moved. So yeah, and there's some great skill. I think the interaction between Lockie Miller and Ash Handley fielding kicks, where no matter the minute they caught the ball, they were looking to bring the other one into play to spread the ball and run pass around. That might not work against St Helens or Wigan, but it did on that night. And no, it's one where I think Rowan Smith deserves the credit rather than the brickbat.
But they'll never get it from some people. We've been through that before. Huddersfield won against Hull. Probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, 24-18, but well done, the Giants. And thanks for kicking off 15 minutes early so we could watch more rugby on Friday night, because the Saints game kicked off at 8 o'clock against the Catalan Dragons. Rod Studd was in his element on Sunday afternoon. He was absolutely loving that Salford versus London match, not least because of the mercurial is the word we use to describe scrum halves, even though we don't know why. They just are mercurial. Hakim Maludi, maverick, I think is the word to describe him. I remember once he was put in the top 4 on the hourly gap for man of the match. You know, I think it was Hull versus Huddersfield, come to think of it. And it was a terrible game, but I still voted for him as man of the match. I think he won because everyone was being pixie-ish online. Now, fair play to Liam Rush. He says to him, don't swear, and he still swears. Obviously, he's made an allegation that will go before the judiciary, and we're back to Steve Mascord's point again now, aren't we? But important win for Salford. London, have we got off London should stay in Super League now just because they've lost a couple of matches? Has that ship sailed again now? I can't keep up with everything. I don't know.
I think that's how it. I mean, I watched that game. I reviewed that game. Not the best game, really. 6-0 at half time to Salford. I wasn't able to listen to the commentary on the footage that I had, so I haven't heard any of that. But unfortunately, the two quick tries in the second half, early in the second half, killed London really, and it sort of took the game beyond them at probably about 18-0. I think that probably made it, or 16-0, something like that. It just felt like the game had gone from their point of view, and they They scored literally right on the final hooter, so they were never really in that game in that second half. It just went away from them. But I mean, in terms of Hakim Maludi, I mean, there's no we talked in the last few weeks about Jake Connor. He's out of the same mold, really. He's just he can be skillful, but he dropped a pass that really he should have caught and probably scored in the corner. He throws silly offloads. And I do wonder at times what a player like that actually brings to your whole makeup of a squad, because he just creates so much disruption. When he's in attack, people are not entirely sure what he's about to do next. So if his teammates are not quite sure, that's all right. But if you're going to throw a silly offload, then the other team just get the ball. So it must be so frustrating to coach a player like that. So frustrating, because I think there's only so much that a player like that will listen to. But yeah, I mean, London are gone, aren't they? London are no longer needed in Super League because they've got, what is it, one win?
They might win in a couple of weeks against St Helens, because Saints always go down to London and lose, of course, as remember from 3 or 4 years ago. So we might be kicking Hull again in a couple of weeks, and we will be, of course, because Leeds will beat them, Phil. So everything will be back to normal.
As a whole, fan who is a friend of 4020 told me yesterday they're dreading going to Magic Weekend because it's Hull against London, and they feel that might be the game that decides who finishes bottom of the ladder. I think Hakim alluded the Gallic Jake Connor. I think that's a selling point. The other thing was, I think, just going back to Liam Rush's performance, and I know that obviously James reviewed it, so he's not going to let us in on those secrets. But I thought it was really, really good. It was quite a broken game. There were lots of stoppages and no flow to it. But I thought he handled it really well. His communication was really good. He was seemed to have a rapport with the players of both sides. The incident towards the end where he walked them over and basically said, "I've only got 2 minutes left. Let's get on with this." And I thought, considering he's so early in his Super League refereeing career, he was excellent.
Phil, we can make a referee's reviewer out of you, because he basically said a lot of what I'd said to Liam in his review. That is what he's showing is, on his 4th Super League game, he's showing an incredible level of maturity, and his communication and talk to the players was excellent. He was able to have different levels of communication, because it's all right trying to be pally, but at times you can't be everybody's pal. You've got to be a little bit firm. And I thought he did that well, but there's things in there that they'll learn from as well. But it was overall it was a good performance for him, and it was a challenging one at times. He had a bit of challenge from the players, but he stood up well to that.
Challenge is one word to describe it. Super League takes a week off, of course. In the Championship, what happened this weekend? Wakefield beat Dewsbury 56-0. Toulouse won 38-24 away at Halifax. So 30-0 up at halftime. Halifax nearly came back in that one. Speaking of comebacks, Widnes did. They came back to beat York 18-22 at the LNER. Swinton, what a match against Featherstone. 42-40 they won that one at the Millennium Stadium. What a game. Doncaster, whatever their stadium's called these days, 25 apiece. Bradford beat Barrow 36-24, and Batley beat the 1895 finalists Sheffield 31-18. And then, again, another comeback win for the Bulldogs in that one. Wakefield top of the table, Widnes in second. I think they meet just after the break, if my memory serves me correctly, or at least at some point in the near future. Then Sheffield, Featherstone, Toulouse, and Bradford making up the top 6 in the Championship. Anything of note you want to say about the Championship, gentlemen?
I just think it's turning into the competition that we thought it would be, that there isn't a week you go by where you could confidently predict the results, other than probably Wakefield, although there will come a cropper one week. The Widnes game sounded really exciting. I think they scored 2 minutes from time, having been behind, giving York a taste of their own medicine from the week before. But with due deference deserved to Mr. Martin Kellner, what a performance from Swinton to go to Featherstone, and that was nip and I mean, again, I was only following the scores on social media while I was watching London and Salford, but you just think, Featherstone have got it. Oh, Swinton have come back, they've got it. Oh no, Featherstone have had a revival. There can't possibly enough time. Oh, there is. Swinton have won it, and again, I wasn't there. Don't know anything that happened, but if you're going to get that excitement in that division more often than you're not, then bring it on. Mr. Kellner will be at Wembley, so we can congratulate him on his team's heroic performance.
Where can we see these games in the chat? 1 hour league. Like where the 1895 Cup finalists, all the Wakefield fans have been, a lot of them have been very upset that the game wasn't going to be on anywhere. And now they're upset because they don't know where Super League Plus is. It's hilarious. I can't wait. Do you think will I be able to sneak a rosette into Wembley? Well, no.
I think you'll get in with a rattle, I think.
Well, I saw all those Real Madrid fans trying to storm in on Saturday, so there's a chance. There's a chance of getting. I'm going to take my passport to get into the stadium, dear listener, into the press box. League One, Midlands 18, Keighley 25, Cornwall beat Newcastle 30 points to 6. Crusaders 24, Oldham 25. Another close game, so almost victory for the Crusaders over the Moneybags of Oldham. Oh, well, I guess Crusaders are Moneybags now. And Workington 22, Hunslet 24. Although that new North Wales Crusaders, not New Wales Crusaders, that takeover yet to be ratified by the shadowy cabal of board of directors of the Rugby Football League. In the Women's Super League, York beat Warrington 44-4. Leeds beat Barrow 68-0. Featherstone 10, Huddersfield 30. And the St Helens 24, Wigan 8. Listen to 2 of those games on Talk Sport over the weekend. And they've got the Challenge Cup final on Saturday as well, which is good news, because I don't think it's on the BBC. Well, it's on BBC Telly, obviously, but I think 5 Live are doing the Union and the tennis on Saturday. So good to have radio coverage for those who don't want to listen to BBC local radio. So that's positive.
And I can't remember the last time, if ever, I saw a prop forward in a women's game score 5 tries. So hats off to Izzy Northrop. I think she sealed her place in the Leeds team for Wembley.
I saw the first Challenge Cup final of the year decided at the EIS in Sheffield. I think there's about 490 there or something for the final, making plenty of noise, plenty of young people there who were on the pitch at halftime having a go. Catalans are too good, 81-18, the final, very nice symmetrical score. Went with a mate who's never seen wheelchair rugby league before. He loved it, thought it was great. But he was upset about them scoring a drop goal. He thought that was a bit disrespectful. But that's the Catalans for you. They're quite good, Phil, which is quite depressing. But everyone's got to catch up with them. Interesting, Seb Bashara saying after the game, which I'm assuming will be quotes in the paper because it wasn't the question I asked him, that they were planning on being in Super League this year, and they got funding to be in Super League this year, but they're not in Super League this year. So maybe they will be in the future.
I think,
but not if you have to fly at 2 a.m. and come back the same day.
Well, I think part of the problem is getting teams out there rather than coming in here. They desperately want to test themselves against Super League opposition because I think they've won the French Championship since 2017, so they do need that extra level. The worry you would have is having watched that game, and hats off to the commentator. I thought he was excellent, bearing in mind. I don't think he knew until 24 hours before he was doing the game that if you did invite them into the competition and they won absolutely everything, then I don't know what benefit that brings to the competition. But they are a joy to watch. They were excellent.
What else do I need to tell you from that one, having listened to the interviews after the game? Apparently the Catalans train a lot outside or on soft ground, so they have to work harder to move the wheels. So when they're on the pitch, it feels like they're gliding. So there's something. Next time you see James Simpson, I know he's going to come on the podcast in 2026, 2027, something like that. I'm only joking. He's been in the army and stuff. That's what they need to do. Get him out on Roundy Park or something with the wheel. Make sure there's no glass or dog muck or any other things, because we know North Leeds is a dangerous place. And Deck Roberts, he won't be at the Challenge Cup final on Saturday, despite being a Wigan fan. He was at the grand final last year and then won the grand final the day after, because he's in Ireland, because it's the Celtic Cup. They say Scotland perhaps the ones to look for. Wales sending a development squad, pretty much, or what he described as, and Ireland growing, so Scotland the ones to keep an eye on this week. So, but it's going on the same time as it will be at Wembley. So, is that's all the weekend? Who's going to win? Who's going to win? What's going to happen? silence because no one wants to
Well,
make a prediction.
we start with the men's game because we've talked about that one already, haven't we? In some ways, I think Phil said it earlier on. I think in terms of the context, I think it's difficult to predict the outcome for that. Does it help Warrington having lost narrowly? But then because they were playing at a fairly full strength Wigan side, they weren't full strength, but fairly strong side, and Warrington had rested quite a number. So does that give them an edge? I don't know. Who knows? I just think in terms of, we saw what was a great final last year, didn't we? But actually, the quality of the game probably wasn't up there. Yes, it was close, and obviously it went to golden point. But I actually think this will be a more intense game, a slightly more physical game, and I think on the basis of their recent successes, I think you'd have to favour Wigan if you were to pick one or the other. But it would be absolutely no surprise if Warrington did one on Wigan for me on the day. As to the women's, I'll let you guys lead that, and I'll just jump on the bandwagon of one way or the other. But on the face of it, if I was going to, stick my neck out, I'd say St Helens because they seem to be the team to beat, don't they, in terms of the Challenge Cup, and can Leeds right what went wrong last year?
Do you get a weekend off then, James, this week? Are you reviewing any of the games?
No, but as far as I'm aware, I have a weekend off. But I will be there. I'm going in with my role as a member of the inclusion board. So the inclusion board members.
Oh, you're in the posh seats. That you don't have to slum it in the media box with us then. No, slum it in the media box as if we're at
I'll wave. I'll do the sort of royal wave from. But I'm hoping it won't be sunny because those seats, if you sat in the sun, get absolutely baking hot. So hopefully it's cloudy.
First world problems, Phil. World problems.
Take a hat.
Yeah.
We've got to wait for one you can borrow.
Are you there for all 3 games, or are you just eating the bonds and leaving at 5 o'clock to get your train?
That would be a test of the strength of my marriage, Phil, if I inflicted 3 games on Stephen. So I think we'll have to sort of plan that one. I haven't raised that subject yet, but I cannot imagine that we will ever stay the course for 3 games. So whether we catch the back end of the first game and maybe a little bit of the last game, I don't know. But I can't envisage that we'll be doing an early morning dawn start that you guys will be as we did last year.
I can't blame anyone who doesn't stay for all 3 games. I'm not going to blame anyone. Cat's destroying this.
We'll send another bottle of Prosecco to your table to make sure he stays for the full 3 games.
Yes, that might help.
We're putting off the inevitable. You're going to go for a Leeds win, aren't you? Surely.
For the women, I am, because I think they're still burning with the fact that they didn't perform as well as they wanted to last year. They managed to score, the fire-esque try that will go down in the annals of Wembley history, but they didn't win. And I think they over-prepared last year, not intentionally. I just think until you've experienced it, you don't know what that is. So, there was a big deal, a breakfast before they left, and there was the getting there early to do the captain's run, and the weight of expectation of history. And the one thing they didn't do was play as well as I think they can. They were pretty ruthless against Barrow, which again is absolutely no guide, but that could have been a banana skin, and it wasn't. So I'm going to go with Leeds in the women because you would expect me to, and you have to stay true to the fact that if you've got some blue and amber in you, you've got to go with it. I think as well, and it won't play a part in any of the speeches or anything, but for the whole Rob thing, they won't want to win it because of Rob, but if they did, then obviously there's an element there that they've done the right thing by his memory. So I just think they'll be ultra determined, and I actually think that they've got the players that can hurt St Helens. So I'm going for Leeds. In the men's, I genuinely have no idea, but I think I'd felt before this weekend that it was going to be Wigan. I've now got a sneaky feeling that it could be Warrington, and that George Williams and Matt Duffy on that stage might be very, very difficult for Wigan to handle. Wigan are probably going to have to maybe play 1, possibly 2 players that originally probably weren't going to be in their 17. They've got such a strong squad anyway, that shouldn't matter. But I think they would have prepared for Kieran being there and Dupree being on the bench. So Sam factor. I suspect that there's a chance he might be picking up his trophy. We haven't talked about the 1895 because obviously Wakefield are going to win that, but don't tell that to anybody from Sheffield who were told exactly the same in 1998.
I'll happily wear a Sheffield hat. They've got some nice hats. I mentioned, just back to the women's final. I don't know who win the men's. I don't know. Probably Wigan. Mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Faye Gaskin, who wears 7. So the other number to pick out, of course, is number 9. And Kira Bennett missed out on Wembley last year, which is why the whole nonsense on Saturday night about, well, we shouldn't ban players for finals. Well, where does that end? If someone takes someone's head off, they shouldn't be banned because it's a final coming up and they can use that ban against somebody in Super League. Nonsense. So Kira Bennett missed out on the final last year. Obviously, one of the standout 9s in the competition because she plays for England. And as she said, after that game against France last year when they wore the MND kit, it was a special kit to her because of the connection to Rob Burrow and to Leeds. So maybe there is one person who will have that in the very back of their mind. But when none of us have played, but when you go out onto the pitch, that's all gone, isn't it? You concentrating on the job at hand. So Saints by 2. I don't know. Whoever wins the finals on Saturday, I'm not bothered about. I just hope it's a good day and we all enjoy ourselves and everyone enjoys the rugby and it's a celebratory mood because that's what it needs to be, doesn't it? We need to, as we started the program, we need to celebrate Rugby League and one of its great sons, and we can do that in the best possible way at Wembley on Saturday, as long as the sun is not shining in James's eyes. That's the perfect situation. That's it, isn't it? We're done now, aren't we? A friend of mine on Facebook wrote a poem last night, and I've read it, so you'll hear that in a moment. But thanks for listening. Be good people, and we'll be back. There'll be something else coming out this week because I recorded it earlier, so look out for that. We'll probably be back on Saturday somehow. Maybe.
Are we doing the journey down in the car? Are we having a road trip?
Yeah, I've got a new camera, so we'll see if that works. And we might do something live from McDonald's if we can. And if you see us, just say hello and have a good week. Do all the stuff. And thanks for listening. Winner by Carol Barwick. I don't know much of rugby or how to throw a ball. I don't know much of footy or any sports at all. But I know when I see a winner, a champion, a star, I know when someone's mentality has got them to where they are. But I also know bodies can fail us and that sadly they fail to conform. Rob Burrow, you lived as a winner. Well, you've done it. You've won, mate. You're home.